Сайн байцгаана уу эрхэм үзэгчдээ манай Syndicate Talk нэвтрүүлгийн манай ээлжчин дугаар энэ удаа Их Британи, Умард Ирландын нэгдсэн Вант улсын нийслэл Лондон хотоос та бүхэнд хүрч байна. Тэгээ энэ удаа маш сонирхолтой зочныг би урьсан байна. Энэ хүн бол Marian Brannelly, Cannes Lion гээд Creative Festival-ийн маань одоо гол бүх шагналыг нь хариуцсан глобал захирал хүнтэй би өнөөдөр ярилцлага хийхээр яг төв оффист нь хүрэлцээрсэн байна. Тэгээд ярилцлага гэж шууд эхлэе. Thanks so much, Marian, for your time to be my interview for my TV talk show.
So delighted. I can't wait for it.
Thank you. So since we have the list time, and let's go directly to the questions. And as you know, the Cannes Lions is actually pretty new in Mongolia, but big Mongolian private companies, as well as creative agencies know, but we wish more companies would know and to be part of this wonderful creative festival. To start with, I would like to ask you the history and the key highlights of the Cannes Lions, and also, every year you organize this great festival in Cannes in France, but do you have other regional awards and activities and the competitions?
Yeah, so I know you mentioned that Cannes Lions is new to Mongolia, but it's actually been running for more than 70 years.
Older than me.
Yeah, way older than you. So it's been, it was introduced in 1954 after the Cannes Film Festival. They introduced it to celebrate the movies, and the advertisers thought, wait a second, we've got great creativity, we want to see that celebrated as well. And for many years it was just the film line. So it was a film line. It started in Venice in Italy, and it switched between Venice and Cannes for many years, and then it settled in Cannes as its spiritual home. And then it wasn't until the 90s that we started introducing other awards. So from film lines, which is the classic and the original, we had print, outdoor, audio, so it started evolving over time. And then in the early 90s we introduced a seminar program with it, so people wanted to learn why this creativity won, why the work won, and trends and themes that they can start looking at. And that then became the start of the actual festival. So there was a celebration of the awards, but also the learning and the networking and the establishing of a community of creatives from all over the world together to learn together. And that has grown, exponentially since then. We now have 30 lions, so everything from the film and the classic right through to things like
30 different categories.
30 different categories, so we have creative strategy, creative business transformation, innovation, so everything from like big picture thinking right through to film craft and film, the actual execution and the delivery of it. And then we have content across 200 hours of content during a week of Cannes, and hundreds of speakers come to the Palais to speak and share their insights. And we have, I think it was more than 13,000 people came to attend the festival this year. So it is a global spread, and it's people from, I think it was 78 markets of people attending this year. So really people from all over the world sharing their insight of what creativity is for them in their market. And that's the global piece. And you mentioned about regional as well. So Cannes brings everyone together from all over the world. But we also recognise that not everyone can come to Cannes, to the south of France, so we also have events in regions. So we have an event in Asia Pacific, which was called Spikes Asia, that covers all of the region. We have Dubai Links, which covers MENA, Middle East and North Africa, and then we have Eurobest, which covers Europe. And again, there's really recognising there's more cultural nuance in these markets, and actually how it's specific to Asia, which is vast in itself. We had a juror from Mongolia on the Spikes Asia juror last year as well. So bringing that nuance and bringing that representation of a different perspective into how creativity is viewed and applied, I think it's a really a specific nuance to Asia as well, which is always very interesting and exciting.
My second question is, why creativity matter nowadays? And actually, how do you define nowadays creativity in age of this rapid technology development and information technology and metadata and the algorithms?
Yeah, creativity matters because it can drive business, it can create business, it can sustain business, but it also can shape society. And we've seen that with work from the 70 years of been running these awards. it can also drive lasting impact. And we've so much evidence of this. And actually, I think the fact that brands and organizations use kind of creativity to apply how they're trying to solve problems, that speaks volumes to that. And that, creativity evolves over time, right? You talked about technology, and just as technology is evolving, so too is creativity, because creativity is looking at how do you solve a problem in an interesting new way, and also how are you applying that creativity to address that problem. And I think it's a really exciting time, because when we look at technology, it's a way to enhance human-led creativity and really do things that were not possible before. You're seeing some content being created really, really quickly and high production value, but you also see people playing with tools in ways that, creating music, creating art, creating, pictures and frames that it would not have been possible, and democratizing that as well, of like from different parts of the world where they may not have had that before. And I think that's a really key part from Lions as well, that we think creativity, and we firmly believe that creativity can come from anywhere. It doesn't just have to be in a big brand, or it can be in your front room, right?
Yes.
And it's playing, and it's learning, and it's growing, and it's shaping something into something different, two dots connect. And I think that's a really great part of the festival as well, because you bring people together from different parts of the world, and how they look at the same problem could be very, very different based on their experiences. And that's a really interesting way of growing and shaping something new in the world that's moving so quickly at the minute. It's an exciting time, I think, for sure.
I'm just curious to know that, eventually, because of this huge technological influence, eventually technology or AI would replace the human creativity?
This is a conversation that I feel like was had up and down the Palais at Cannes this year, and it's continuing to be had all over. I think fundamentally, from the conversations that we've heard, is that technology is driven by individuals, right? And actually it's bringing two perspectives together. So human-led is always going to be technology enhanced, right? So it's human first. I think it has to be somebody putting those, putting the prompt into the platform, or putting, turning on the technology to actually try and solve that problem. And I think it's as an Albert Einstein quote of, if he had an hour to solve a problem, he would spend 59 minutes on the question. That's a really, that's a really important part of that as well. The solution isn't always necessarily the creative piece. The actual thinking is the creativity.
Yes. According to my experience in Cannes Lions, that's my personal experience. The NGOs and non-profits creativity is sometimes far more better than, the creative than the private sector, because they have, they always touch the societal big issues, disability, climate change, etc. And also they have the less resources, but they do, crazy creative, campaigns, just amazing. And this year I was selected by the Cannes Lions, DEI participants, and thank you for that. And learned also lots of things. So my question is, how does Cannes Lions ensure that voices from these underprivileged and disabled communities are heard and celebrated?
It's a great question, and I think, to my point earlier about the global piece, is that's one part of it. But global is only one element of inclusion and representation, right? So it's looking at disability advocacy, as you said, is looking at geographical and bringing it in, and lived experiences. And increasingly, there's a couple of different ways that we do that. So on our stages, we have an open call for content. So anyone from anywhere in the world can submit their idea to speak on one of our stages. And it's independently verified. So our team go through it, and we have a set of criteria to make sure that we're hearing new voices, we're hearing maybe ideas that not have been heard before, with different lived experiences and different perspectives as well. So that's one way on our stages. Within our juries, we have a platform in place where we're looking at making sure that geographical representation, that we look at the big networks and holdcos, but also independent agencies, brands, specialists, and again, different lived experiences with gender, with kind of sexuality, all of that kind of piece is kind of being taught into that, because we're trying to, again, bring those different ideas when you're assessing what great creativity looks like, that there's interesting perspectives that are in there. And then finally, as you mentioned, that we've got our ERA program, which is introduced equity, representation and access.
You waived like more than 2 million euros
on
pass.
passes.
Yeah,
Exactly. And
Amazing.
again, that's the idea of to be, we know people get to come to Cannes, so maybe they've made their way to France, but the value is to being in the room with the right people. So how we can create that opportunity for, if you've made it here, let's open the door and bring that chair to the table. And that's another way. So again, that's an application process. So people from anywhere in the world can apply, and you kind of share what your experience is. And then again, the jury, we have a assessment, and that's balanced out so that we make sure that different markets are represented, and it's not just big brands or big companies or bigger markets. There's learnings from everywhere across the world as well.
I know, and also all the people who were the part of the Cannes Lions, we all know that Cannes Lions is more than awards, it's beyond that. And what's the biggest impact so far on society and community? And can you also share an example of the campaign that challenged cultural norms and still, won big?
Yeah, so we have 2 lions that actually we've introduced over the past maybe 10 years, where all of the funds from those lions go towards charitable donations. So our SDG lions, which is the Sustainability Development Goals lions, they were developed with in collaboration with the UN, and there's a category for each of the 17 goals. And each year we donate some of the funds from that lion towards charitable endeavours that are.
We should do it same thing for the Special Olympics.
Yeah, well, let's chat for sure.
In a global moment,
But yeah, so that's one way. So when people are entering, so the work is being celebrated from the line, but also it's doing even further good because it's going on to fund either research or grassroots organisations. And then similarly for the glass lion, which was introduced in 2014 to celebrate representation within gender and actually promote progressive representation. But in 2025, we expanded it beyond so that it actually looked at, as an entrant, you could say, what's the community I'm trying to serve? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And what's the impact that had? So really moving away from this is a stunt from a brand to just do one-off, to actually being, this is embedding within that community and really driving change for that organization and for that local community. And again, the funds go towards kind of furthering research or charitable organizations. And a great example actually of a piece of work that has benefited from this is this year's Grand Prix in the Glass Lion. And it was for Dove's Real Beauty. And it was a platform that's been running for nearly 20 years. And it's changed the category of beauty products. It changed how people perceive beauty within the industry, but it also changed their business. It was something like 350% growth within the brand. So it fundamentally changed how this organization did business and created a whole new opportunity of category for them to attract that audience. So again, it's that long-term impact, but thinking about not extractive, but also giving back and sharing with their community in a really meaningful way. I think there's so many examples of that, but that's just a really kind of recent one that's top of my mind. That's long-term impact and not just this year.
I love that campaign, the Dove. That's just amazing, Speechless, my next question is, nowadays, many years ago, before the social media, the creativity was different. Now is almost everybody can be a creator using the social media. Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, X, or whatever, YouTube, and then I noticed that social and creator line category was added recently. Just a few years ago in the Cannes Lions. And what are reasons and what are you expecting?
The social influencer line was introduced a couple of years ago, and then this year we changed it to social and creator. I mean, exactly as you said, it's booming. This is an area where brands are focusing their energies, creators are popping up everywhere, and they're building these new ideas. And also consumers, you and I, are engaging with that content. So this is where messages are being conveyed, and this is where content is being shared and created. So I think this is where creativity is burgeoning, and I think that's really what we're always looking to do, looking at where is creativity really showing up in new and novel ways, and that's why we introduced it, to keep pace, but also to kind of for brands to look at, well, where can I get inspiration for how I want to address this business challenge that I have, and actually how am I, what can I do differently? How can I connect with this audience? Everyone talks about Gen Z,
Yeah.
but actually there is, our audiences or even elder than us, like they're on these social platforms as well, and they are engaging with brands and content in that way. So really trying to look at creating opportunities, and creators are brands in themselves. They're creating entire media empires, but also doing something in really innovative ways. And I think that's just such a fascinating space to be in. And we've heard, at Cannes this year, well, the last 2 years, we had a platform called Lions Creators. And that's a kind of a microcosm of the festival. So we had dedicated content just for creators, so creators speaking to other creators about their journey, but also brands listening. This is what we want to work with. Here's the challenges that we're facing when we're trying to find creators, or here's the challenges on both sides. So it was a really kind of reciprocal way of creating that opportunity and that mini community within that. And that's continuing to grow and, creating more opportunity. And people, the feedback we heard this year was people want to see that grow. They want to see more. They want to learn more from the creators, and the brands also want to share their point of view of how they're investing. And so many of the big brands are really going big on creator because they think that's the way of, getting their message through in an authentic way.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of aligning with, this is a creator that speaks my language. I'm going to trust them. So let's work together and a real kind of do something interesting.
Then some influencers work and influence far better than the maybe small and mid-sized companies, creative agencies nowadays, using their own platform and creativity. My next question is, what's your take on the rise of creator-led storytelling versus traditional agency work?
I think there's a place for both, right? And we see that in the way we evolve the categories each year. Yeah. Film is still one of our biggest awards, and brand experience is growing. We've got social and creator. There's an opportunity, again, I think going back to that point around authenticity.
Yeah.
People want to engage with content that stops them in their tracks in some way, whether it makes them laugh, whether it makes them pause to think about things. And that is great storytelling. So regardless of the medium, and I think that really shows through in, the work that we see winning every year. There's usually the things that win big are the things that have a great story. And whichever way it's shared, or whether it's on a social post, or whether it's a beautiful, 60-second, that the thing that really hooks you is that story and how it's connecting with the audience, and really understanding what the audience would want to see in that. And feedback that we often give to entrants when they're thinking about entering is like, what's the job to be done? If you're a marketer, what are you trying to get your audience to do? Are you trying to make them sad, or are you trying to make them happy, or to sell a product? Really thinking about that, and did it do that? That's the thing. That's ultimately, that's what we're here to do. It's the applying creativity to solve a business challenge or to sell a product. So that's kind of, it's not creativity for the sake of creativity, really, as well.
In some countries, for example, in Mongolia, some of the companies think that the money that's being spent for the marketing, they think it's a cost. Of course, it's a cost on the balance sheet, but we see it as an investment, not really a cost. And why should the clients and companies invest in creativity, regardless in Mongolia and globally? And also they should work with the professional agencies. Some of them, they would like to have the in-house marketing team, etc. And of course, both they have advantages and disadvantages. And what are the importances of it these days?
Yeah, I think that we did some research with Interbrand before the festival this year, and they looked at companies that had won Lions in previous years, and that obviously then is they're investing in creativity, right? But what they found was that companies that won Lions, the next year their profitability increased 2.5%, and their actual returns increased also. So really looking at that investment of creativity is generating profit for your business, or changing your market share, or improving how consumers perceive your brand.
So reputation, yeah?
It really is. And it's also a point of distinction. If you see increasing, content can be made like that. Yeah. And as we're getting through more and more technology, there's more and more content coming more quickly. So how do you be distinct in that? having a point of difference. And I can't remember who said it, but there's a really great quote of, creativity is the last unfair advantage you have as a brand. So being creative and applying that creativity to tell your story is the way that you can stand out from your competitors who are maybe doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. Zig when people are zagging. So yeah, I would say that would be the thing, and it doesn't matter where it comes from again, right? It could be an independent, it could be a creator, it could be a big network, but it could be the brand themselves. That piece is less the point of like the creative idea and how it's doing something for your brand, tying it back to that.
Now let's focus on the Mongolian market.
Yes.
Okay, where I'm from. And what advice would you give to young creatives from smaller markets like Mongolia who want to break up into the global scene? Also, what makes a submission, truly stand out to the jury beyond polish and production value?
Two great questions. I'll take the first one about the young lion or the young talent, and we have a program called Young Lions, and they happen at the local level. So each country across the world can host a Young Lions competition. And then that individual, and you mentioned that how your
this year we had the 2 young girls from the competition. That's the biggest mobile operator company. They represented. That was a great experience.
Yeah, and it's just a great experience for, if you're working in the industry day to day, you have a brief, you have deadlines, you have a firm kind of brand guidelines that you can and can't use. This competition gives you free rein to use your creativity and really engage in that and create a moment to be recognized. And if you're doing it at a national level, brands are looking at that. Brands are looking at who are competing and how they're doing. That's at the national level. But then going on to the global, if you get into that competition, that work again, people are looking, it's on the Friday, I don't know, were you there on the Friday afternoon when the winners are announced? It is the most joyful experience. This is so joyful. And this year we had winners from Turkey and Venezuela for the first time. So it's any country, it doesn't matter the size, it's the creativity that really drives us. That's such a great opportunity for young talent. The ERA program, as I mentioned earlier, is another great opportunity to get involved, or the regional festivals as well, to kind of to get involved in that. There are other things like the brief, getting involved with the brief and being part of the brief, which goes out once a quarter, and getting involved to showcase your talent, to work and actually how you can apply your great thinking to those problems that you're trying to solve. And then to your second question about kind of Mongolian creativity.
Yes, please.
So this year we had 27,000 entries from 96 markets. So entries from all over the world. And there were winners from 48 markets. So there's, it's a wide breadth of where the work is winning. And then when it comes to the jury, there were more than 79 markets represented in the jury. So again, that diversity, that breadth of representation is really, really important, so that if you're looking at a piece of work, that it's not just all work you're seeing from that you're already familiar with. And then on the entry itself, we ask for a couple of things. So we ask, what's the cultural context that the jury should know? So is there something happening? Is this the first time that happens in your market? Is this, is it a very traditional market and this is something very new and taboo that would never happen? And actually it might be different in maybe a more mature market, but actually this in this market, it's really novel. It's really pushing the boundaries. Let the jury know, give them that runway so that then becomes a reason for them to debate the discussion, right? And then going back to the point I made earlier, what's the job you were trying to do with this work? Like, why does it exist in the world? Why is it relevant for this brand? And then what happened as a result? So if you were trying to create a film or a creator campaign and you wanted to sell trainers, but ultimately you just saw impressions, that there's a disconnect there. So what problem were you trying to solve for the brand? And if it is just brand awareness, great, your follower count increased or whatever that is, tie back the job you're trying to do with the impact the work had. And that's a really key piece, because the creative will do its own thing, right? You're going to see something great or hear something great, that will get you in the door. It's how you tell your story is how you'll get from a short list to a medal and onto that discussion in the jury rooms. So I think that it doesn't matter how polished it is, it's how you tell that story is really key. And that's what, this industry is great at telling stories, so this is another way to tell them in a slightly different way.
The question for the the challenge for countries like us, communities like us, is that often some of those people complain that, look, we compete against the giant, So big companies, big brands have the huge budget, but we are not only the small market, but also the budget and resources which can be dedicated on those kind of the creative work is considerably small. And then again, my question is, big agencies have budgets and polish and global reach, and Mongolian creators often work with the grit and not gross. And how shall we compete, and what needs to be done for their entry level for Cannes Lions? That's the first, the biggest challenge. And also I would like to ask you, please encourage Mongolian creators, agencies and community, what we need to prepare and what's the homework?
Yeah, well, I mean, the homework is that there's a lot of resources available, and I think sometimes people don't know where to look. But we have a team available on hand 365 because they work in all of the regions as well. And if you've got an idea that you're like, this is a piece of work that we want to enter, but we just don't know where and we don't know where to start, that is where we can help. It's completely, they're complementary, so we can help the whole process. And we have insights from the jury room. So we listen to what's happening in the jury room, and we take that and we use that to create new products, but within the awards. But also we share insights. So being like, this is what the jury were looking for. These are the types of things that stood out to them in that jury room. And on the website for Cannes Lions at the moment, you'll see insights from the jury room. So we have stage sessions where we interview, something like this, jury members from each of the jury. So they have 30 minutes to tell us why they chose the work that they did, and we talk through the discussions that they had and the debate that they had. And that's a really, really valuable, and that's accessible on the website. So that's a great place to start to take that on. And then I think the other thing, really, it always comes back to, and feedback that we get every year, is people try and look at the categories and see where we can enter. But I always start with the work. Where is your work? What is your work? What do you want to be recognized for? What do you want that to be stood out? What's the strongest part of the work? And then find categories to match that, rather than categories, start with the categories and then match the work to it. The work is the hero. The categories are the lens that you're looking at the work. So really, really framing it in that. And again, the team can help support, and we can put some time in and all of that. So that would be my guidance of always, always, always lead with the work, because fundamentally the jury are looking at that. They're looking at the creativity of it. They really, that's at the heart. Everything comes down to, is this a great creative idea? Did it work?
So the Mongolia case, we have some progress, apparently. And as you mentioned before, that Mongolian guys participated this year in the Young Lions, and as well as the Mongolian government in cooperation with the Edelman Agency. So we have the Mongolia Babylon, first time ever, Cannes Lions this year. Also, the two young Mongolians have been named as jury spikes, and the one guy also in the Cannes too. So that's so we have all the progress. But it is not enough. So we really would like to have this one, goal line. And how do you see the Mongolia's potential value and contribution back to you and back to this great community?
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, we believe that creativity can come from anywhere. And I think seems to be a real appetite from the Mongolian industry to actually be recognized and be noticed. And that's exciting, because when there's ambition, it means that there's something happening behind it. And obviously there's a very great industry over there that's really doing great things. When you see great talent coming through, when they're coming onto the juries, that's exciting, because it means it's opening up a whole new avenue for us to see what great creativity looks like in a different market, how you're approaching problems, how you're approaching, applying your thinking to something new, and that could be very different to what we see elsewhere in the world. And that's where this magical things happens, when people get inspired by, that's what they're doing over there, that's exactly the problem I have in Guatemala, I want to try that. And that then translates completely differently into a different part of the world, and so vice versa, right? So I think there's a real, it's a really great moment when kind of a market starts to come in. And we talked earlier about, Kazakhstan, your neighbor, they won their first line a couple of years ago, and since then have won, spikes, they've won Grand Prix at spikes, they're really, really pushing, and it raises the bar for the rest. So when one agency wins, it really sets a standard. And it makes people proud of their industry and actually want to achieve and raise that ambition further and be recognized on that global stage. It's really, really important, especially when you think of technology really changing how we're operating. That human-led creativity is really, really valuable, and being recognized by your peers, by industry, by the global industry, it's a motivator to do even bolder and better things.
Thank you very much for your time, and perhaps I would like to leave the last question to you openly. And if I didn't ask you, what you would like to say, please say your, opinion in the comments. Perhaps some tips next year's count lines.
I think the thing I would say is, I just talked about it earlier, like really that ambition, that creative ambition. I think it's at the core. Cannes Lions was founded on celebration, community, network and learning. And that's fundamentally what we need to hold on to. So rather than kind of racing headlong into technology, really pausing and reflecting on how we're applying this to not just business problems, but social problems. So we talked earlier about sustainability and diversity. How are we using our thinking to create better change in the world? And I think that's exciting. We know that creativity impacts businesses, and that can also work for society. And I really love to see more of that happening in the world.
Thank you, Marian. За баярлалаа эрхэм үзэгчдээ. Ингээд өнөөдрийн нэвтрүүлгээр бид нэр дэлхийн хамгийн том creative festival болох Cannes Lions-ы төв офисоос энэхүү ярилцлага хүргэлээ. Тэгээд манай ярилцлагыг дуглаас сонирхуулсан дагуу маш их баярлалаа.